New CNN reporting this morning, the Secret Service appears at odds with local law enforcement over who exactly is to blame for the security failures leading up to the attempted assassination of Donald Trump. President Biden weighed in on these concerns.
I feel safe with the Secret Service. The question is, should they have anticipated what happened? Should they have done what they needed to do to prevent this from happening? That's a question that's an open question.
All right, with us now, CNN's Whitney Wild. Aside from what the president said, the question here seems to be who had responsibility for the key area where the shooter was.
There is a lot of finger pointing this morning, and let me walk you through what we know and then give you some context here, because we're really getting a glimpse into a relationship that is normally closed off to the general public, but is very, very close. It's this almost familial relationship between law enforcement agencies. Sometimes that relationship under the surface is fraught, but it rarely bubbles up into public view, and that is certainly what is happening here. There's new CNN reporting this morning, a source telling CNN that there were local snipers inside the building where the shooter later perched to shoot former President Donald Trump. What we know is that there were snipers who were inside that building. They were on the second floor and they were providing overwatch. We also know that the Secret Service did not sweep that building themselves because they say that was outside of the perimeter and that local police were supposed to secure that area. The Secret Service director, Kimberly Cheadle, spoke out. She says she's taking responsibility for this. Here's her interview with ABC News.
The Secret Service is responsible for the protection of the former president.
So the buck stops with you?
The buck stops with me. I am the director of the Secret Service. It was unacceptable, and it's something that shouldn't happen again.
Members of local law enforcement that I have spoken with are taking serious issue with the director's comments. For example, the president of the Fraternal Order of Police sent out a statement last night taking a lot of issue with what they perceive as way too much blame being put on local law enforcement for what was ultimately an operational plan signed off on by the Secret Service. Additionally, the executive director of the Fraternal Order of Police said this: apparently, it took 2 days for the buck to stop. There is going to be an erosion of this trust caused by the Secret Service's injudicious statements. Additionally, the Pennsylvania State Police, which was one of the agencies that was involved in this operational plan, has said that they work with the Secret Service to provide whatever is requested, but ultimately that they are the lead in that security. So again, you're seeing this fracture here, who's responsible for what, and certainly within local law enforcement, there's a perception way too much blame is being put on local law enforcement for what was a Secret Service operational plan. Meanwhile, the Secret Service is saying that they are taking responsibility for this. However, I think the issue here, Jim, is that they are not detailing their own failures here. Back to you.
Yeah, what's going to be important is to figure out how to fill these holes. They have to take responsibility for it so they can figure out what to fix. Whitney Wild, thank you so much.
It's been almost 3 days since the attempted assassination on former President Donald Trump. We still have no motive at this point, and we still have no real explanation for how a man with an AR-15 rifle was able to get into a roof position and fire shots despite shouts from the crowd. We showed you that video just a short while ago. There are still dozens of unanswered questions this morning. We're going to try to spend some time to get some answers with an expert panel. Juliette Kayyem is former Assistant Secretary at the Department of Homeland Security. Andrew McCabe is a former FBI Assistant Director. Darren Porcher is a former NYPD Lieutenant. And Kevin Chmielewski has decades worth of experience working with campaigns and helping coordinate with the Secret Service. Let me start with you first, Andrew. You're here in the studio with me. The fact that we have no motive at this point, what are your thoughts on that? It's strange.
It is a little odd, but there are a couple things at play here, Jim. One, I think to some extent we're used to understanding a motive right away from our many experiences with mass shooters, many of whom leave some sort of writing behind and they leave it somewhere that it can be found quickly. That's obviously not the case here. This is going to take longer. They have made some progress with the cell phone and with his computer. I understand that none of those are really giving them a very clear indication of what his motive is. But there's always the possibility that we won't know. And of course, the most famous example of that is Stephen Paddock, the Las Vegas shooter. After years of investigation, we have really no clear motive as to why he did that.
And Juliette Kayyem, let me go out to you because, I mean, you and I have had so many conversations over the years about mass shootings and so on. The fact that we don't know what the motive is here. And also, I mean, we need to get into the discussion with the full panel about this just operational breakdown that took place with the Secret Service.
That's exactly right. There's sort of two pieces to this. As Andrew was saying, there's the why, the motive, what brought him to this moment. And it may be that we are in a situation where the motivations are mixed. They're not clear. There's no singular narrative that we can understand or that we will ever understand about him. The second is this security breakdown. Look, there's going to be there's no way this was a security success. There are going to be lots of reasons for the security failure. The one I'm really focused on is the decision at some stage, a determination that that building was outside the security zone. Looking at it now, it's just awfully close. Other buildings that were as close were more protected. So we need to figure out why that designation was made, because that then, what unfolds after that is a series of openings, loopholes, vulnerabilities that are taken advantage of by a, not a terribly sophisticated attacker.
And Darren Porcher, let me go to you on that. A source telling CNN that a local sniper team was stationed inside the building where the gunman was, but they were on the second floor. Why would a local sniper team be on the second floor? I mean, it just seems to me you would want a team on the roof with eyes on all the rooftops in that area.
That's the million-dollar question, Jim. It's not uncommon for the Secret Service to deploy local law enforcement for certain areas, such as the building. But the security, or I should say those police officers, should have been on the roof. Now, one of the questions was the roof was sloped. Therefore, they felt that there was a level of danger. But we're at a stage where we can now use drone technology, and that should have been deployed if they felt that there was a security risk to the safety of the officers if they were on that vaulted roof. But bigger than that, the question remains as to when there was an identification made by people on the ground that there was an individual on this roof, why was there not a radio transmission? You had an officer that deployed and attempted to get to that top of that roof. However, there should have been a radio transmission that would have availed both the Secret Service sharpshooters and the other officers to the propensity for danger, because you would have had a much quicker interdiction that way, as opposed to the officer climbing to the roof. And as we see, he panicked and he came down.
Yeah, and Kevin, you and I know each other from being out on the campaign trail together. You worked on Republican campaigns in advance and body guy capacities for many years. I mean, Kevin, what do you think about the fact that, I mean, there was a minute and 57 seconds between when the rally goers were noticing the gunman on the roof and when the shots were fired? I mean, Kevin, I know you have a lot of experience working with Secret Service as they're moving around these campaign rally sites. It just seems like a major gap in the security there that they weren't covering.
Well, let's also remember, too, obviously we know what side of the fence I'm on. President Trump is not the current president. If it was the current president, the assets and resources are 1,000 times more than what a nominee, the presumptive, even a former. So if this was the current president, the assets and resources, it would have never happened. Has nothing to do with Biden or Trump or Republican or Democrat. It has to do with the acting president and continuity of government. If President Biden was here, it would be thousands more Secret Service agents, law enforcement, quite frankly, the military and everything else. So I think that's what we've kind of missed in this entire thing is President Trump isn't the current president, and there's a massive difference between a current president and a presidential nominee.
Yeah, and Andrew, I mean, one of the questions moving forward is what should happen? I mean, from an accountability standpoint. I mean, we saw the Secret Service director saying the buck stops with me, but you have to wonder. Is there going to be some accountability over at the Secret Service after all of this? Typically, after something like this, that's what happens.
There certainly should be, right? And that starts with an investigation. And I don't mean the FBI investigation of the event. That will provide crucial facts to the inspectors who come in to look at the service's performance. But nevertheless, those independent investigators need to sort through this, figure out the times, the radio calls, who was where, understand the entirety of it to expose failures in the security plan and in the execution of that plan. This is not to hold individuals, to point our finger at somebody, call them a bad guy and fire them. This is to ensure that the service performs better the next time.
Well, and you have the Secret Service saying, well, we thought local police was handling that. and you have the local police saying, well, the Secret Service, you know, they're the ones who are in charge of the site. I mean, ultimately, it comes down to the Secret Service. They're the ones who are supposed to bring in the plan, execute that plan, make sure something like this doesn't happen.
And part of that plan, a big part of it is working with local law enforcement. Working with them means explaining to them exactly what you need, how they should react in every situation. You know, if there was a failure in communication there of what their responsibilities were or how we expected them to react, that's on the service as well.